Long ago, in the land of Uz, there lived a man named Job. He was a man of great wealth, great wisdom, and great faith. Among all the people of the East, Job was known as a man who lived with integrity. He was blameless in his ways, not because he was perfect, but because he honored God and turned away from evil. He cared deeply for others, treated his servants with fairness, and used his blessings to help those around him. Job had 7 sons and 3 daughters. His family was large, and his household was full of life. His sons often held feasts in their homes, inviting their brothers and sisters to join them. They enjoyed the blessings they had been given, but Job always carried a concern in his heart. He would wake up early in the morning and offer sacrifices to God for his children. He would say, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Job did this continually because his love for his family was deep, and he wanted them to remain close to the Lord. God looked upon Job and knew the sincerity of his heart. But one day, in the heavenly realm, the sons of God came before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. God said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth upon it." Then the Lord said, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and turns away from evil." But Satan replied, "Does Job fear God for nothing? You have protected him and everything he owns. You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and take away everything he has, and he will surely curse you." The Lord knew Job's heart. He knew that Job's faith was not based only on his blessings. So he allowed Satan to test Job, saying, "Everything he has is in your power, but you may not touch the man himself." And Satan left the presence of the Lord. Then the day came when Job's life changed forever. Job was sitting peacefully when one of his servants suddenly ran toward him. The servant's clothes were torn, and fear was written across his face. He fell before Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby when enemies attacked. They killed the servants with swords, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you." Before Job could even process the terrible news, another servant arrived. He said, "Fire from heaven fell and burned up the sheep and the servants. I alone survived." Then another messenger came with even more terrible words. He said, "The raiders came and stole your camels. They killed the servants who were watching them. I alone escaped." Job's world was falling apart one message at a time. Then came the final messenger. He approached slowly, and Job could already see the sorrow in his eyes. The servant said, "Your sons and daughters were together at their oldest brother's house. They were eating and drinking when suddenly a powerful wind came from the wilderness. It struck the house, and it collapsed on them. They are all dead." The moment Job heard those words, his heart broke. The children he loved, the children he prayed for, the children he protected, they were gone. Job tore his robe in grief. He shaved his head and fell to the ground. He cried out in pain, but even in his sorrow he worshipped God. He said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will leave this world. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In all of this, Job did not sin or blame God. But Satan was not finished. Again, the heavenly beings came before the Lord, and Satan appeared. The Lord said, "Have you considered my servant Job? He still holds on to his integrity, even though you tried to destroy him without reason." Satan answered, "A person will give everything to save his own life, but stretch out your hand and strike his body, and he will surely curse you." The Lord said, "Very well, he is in your power, but you must spare his life." So Satan went away and struck Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. Job was covered in suffering. The man who once lived in comfort now sat among ashes. The man who once had everything now scraped his wounds with a piece of broken pottery. His body was in pain. His heart was wounded. His life had become unrecognizable. Even his wife looked at him and said, "Are you still holding on to your faith? Curse God and die." But Job answered, "You speak like a foolish person. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" Even in his suffering, Job refused to turn against God. Soon, 3 of Job's friends heard about his pain. Their names were Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. They came to comfort him. When they saw Job from a distance, they could barely recognize him. They cried loudly, tore their clothes, and sat with him on the ground. For 7 days and 7 nights, they said nothing. They simply sat with him because they saw how great his suffering was. But eventually, Job opened his mouth. He cursed the day he was born. He cried out, "Why was I born? Why was I allowed to see this suffering?" Job was not rejecting God. He was expressing the deepest pain of his heart. His friends began to speak. Eliphaz said, "Job, think carefully. Have you ever seen the innocent suffer? Perhaps you are being punished for something you have done." Bildad said, "God is just. If you are suffering, there must be a reason. Seek him, and he will restore you." Zophar said, "Perhaps you deserve even more than what has happened. Turn back to God and ask for mercy." But Job knew his own heart. He answered, "I have not turned away from God. I do not understand why this has happened, but I know I have not abandoned him." The conversations continued for many days. Job cried out, "I wish I could stand before God and ask him why. I wish I could explain my case before him." His friends continued to argue that suffering must always be a punishment for wrongdoing, but Job continued to defend his faith. He said, "Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him." Job did not understand God's plan, but he still believed God was worthy of trust. As the discussion continued, another man named Elihu arrived. He had been listening quietly. He was younger than the others, but he believed everyone had spoken without true understanding. Elihu said, "God is greater than we can understand. He is not unjust. Sometimes God uses suffering to teach, to correct, and to draw people closer to him." Then something happened that changed everything. God himself spoke to Job. From a whirlwind, the Lord answered him. God said, "Who is this that speaks without knowledge? Prepare yourself. I will question you, and you will answer me." The Lord reminded Job of his greatness. He asked, "Where were you when I created the earth? Who formed the mountains? Who controls the seas? Can you command the morning? Can you understand the depths of creation?" God showed Job that his wisdom was far beyond human understanding. The world was not controlled by human knowledge. It was held in the hands of the Creator. Job listened, and he finally understood. He answered, "I know that you can do all things. I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me." Job humbled himself before God. He said, "I had heard of you before, but now my eyes have seen you." The Lord then turned to Job's friends and told them they had not spoken rightly about him. He instructed them to offer sacrifices and asked Job to pray for them. And when Job prayed for his friends, God restored his life. The Lord blessed Job again. He gave him twice as much as he had before. His lands became greater. His possessions increased. His household was restored. Job had new sons and daughters, and his family once again filled his home with joy. The Lord blessed the later years of Job's life even more than the beginning. Job lived many years after his suffering. He saw his children and grandchildren grow, and he experienced the goodness of God again. The story of Job remains one of the greatest stories of faith ever told, because Job teaches that faith is not only for the days when life is easy. Real faith is tested in the darkness. It is tested when prayers seem unanswered. It is tested when everything familiar disappears. Job lost his wealth. He lost his children. He lost his health. But he never completely lost his trust in God. And in the end, Job discovered that even when he could not understand God's plan, God was still with him.